Most people don't notice democracy slipping until it's already in real trouble. It doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It fades through small, quiet changes that are easy to overlook. That's why it's important to understand what's at stake. Today, I want to explain clearly and calmly why losing democracy is dangerous, not in a political way, but in a human way that affects your daily life. Think of this as a quick guide to the warning signs and why they matter. Democracy isn't just about voting every few years. It's a system designed to protect your voice, your rights, and your role in shaping the society you live in. It creates rules that keep leaders accountable, keep institutions transparent, and keep ordinary people safe from abuses of power. When democracy weakens, those protections don't disappear overnight. They just get softer, blurrier, and easier to ignore. And once those guardrails weaken, everything built on top of them becomes fragile. One of democracy's core benefits is that leaders can be challenged, questioned, and replaced. Without that, power starts to concentrate. And once power concentrates, it becomes tempting for those holding it to use it for themselves instead of the public. Corruption grows quietly at first. Favors here, punishments there. But it spreads quickly when no one can push back. When accountability disappears, people in charge can act however they want, and citizens lose the ability to correct the course. Accountability affects more of your daily life than you might think. It shapes how your tax money is used, how public services function, how safe your community feels, and whether your concerns reach anyone who can actually fix them. When leaders aren't held responsible for their actions, mistakes go uncorrected, corruption goes unchecked, and trust in institutions fades. And once people stop trusting the system, everything from public safety to basic cooperation becomes harder. Rights almost never disappear all at once. They shrink slowly, often starting with small exceptions that seem harmless or temporary. Maybe certain speech is discouraged, certain protests restricted, certain groups monitored. Each step feels manageable on its own, but over time, those small limits pile up, and suddenly the space where people can express themselves or challenge power becomes tiny. The danger is that most people don't realize this shrinkage until their rights are already too small to defend. A healthy democracy protects everyone, not just the majority. Minority groups, whether defined by culture, religion, politics, or identity, depend on democratic institutions to keep them safe and treated fairly. When democracy weakens, these protections weaken too. It becomes easier for certain groups to be blamed, targeted, or pushed out of public life. Even if you're not part of those groups, this matters deeply because the loss of rights for one community eventually becomes a loss of rights for others. In a strong democracy, laws apply equally to everyone, including the people who write them. When democracy erodes, the legal system can start bending, punishing critics more harshly, protecting allies more generously, and ignoring wrongdoing when it's politically convenient. Once the rule of law stops being fair, justice loses its meaning. And when that happens, it affects everything from business stability to personal safety, because people no longer know what to trust. One of the earliest signs of democratic decline is when information becomes harder to access. Independent media might be pressured, journalists discouraged from investigating, or criticism framed as a threat. Even without outright censorship, fear can make people stay quiet. With fewer voices and less transparency, citizens can't make informed decisions. And once only approved narratives are allowed, misinformation becomes easier, not harder, because people can't compare viewpoints or verify anything for themselves. Democracy and economic stability are more connected than they seem. Investors, workers, and businesses rely on predictable rules and transparent institutions. When democracy weakens, corruption usually grows, contracts become less reliable, and decisions are made behind closed doors. That erodes trust and slows economic growth. Over time, the gap between those with power and those without it widens, creating an economy that works for fewer and fewer people. The instability doesn't stay political. It hits people's wallets, homes, and opportunities. Here's the toughest part. Once democracy weakens, rebuilding it is incredibly difficult. The protections that make society fair and stable take years to build, but can be dismantled in much less time. Restoring them requires cooperation, courage, and a long rebuilding process. That's why noticing the early signs matters so much. Understanding the dangers isn't about fear. It's about staying aware and protecting the systems that protect all of us. Democracy works best when people pay attention to it before it's gone.